choosing the right type of light source can have a huge impact on the mood of our piece. So how do these different types of light work? And how can we paint them correctly? Let's say you have a light bulb. Light can be thought of as beams traveling outward from the light source. So our light bulb will be emitting light in all directions. Objects around the light bulb will be lit according to which plane is facing the light bulb. Additionally, we have a concept called light falloff, where objects further away from the light bulb will become exponentially darker. If we double the distance of these cubes from the light bulb, they become dramatically darker. Now you might be thinking, hold up a minute, in the last lesson, the light was always just coming from one angle and you never mentioned light falloff. But don't worry, the rules haven't changed, they just have some nuance to them. So let's look at the sun. Not literally though. Bad for your eyes. If we zoom out to a cosmic scale, the sun is behaving exactly like our light bulb. It's a spherical light source emitting light in all directions. What's different is that the sun is unfathomably bigger, brighter, and further away from us than the light bulb. Although the sun is emitting light in all directions, because of its size and distance, by the time we're looking at objects on Earth, the light is, for all intents and purposes, traveling in a single direction. Now, what about light falloff? Why doesn't that happen with the sun? Well, it does, just not on a perceptible level here on Earth, because light falloff has to do with the brightness of the light source and the relative distance of the object to that light source. In order for us to get even 1% farther away from the sun than we are, we'd have to travel about 930,000 miles. Now let's go back to our light bulb. In the first example, these cubes are about 3 feet away from the light bulb, and their lightest planes have a value around 6. If we double the distance of the cubes from the light to 6 feet, the planes drop to a value of 2. This gives us 2 important things to remember about light falloff. First, light falloff is dependent on relative distance of the object to the light source. Second, light falloff is exponential. This is all kind of technical, but we have to learn the rules if we're going to create convincing illusions of reality on our canvas. With this understanding of the sun versus the light bulb, we've described 2 of the most important light sources we can use in our paintings to create the right kind of mood. We can either use a strong, distant light source like the sun, which is very even and consistent in its direction and brightness, or we can use weaker and closer light sources which have more varied direction and are subject to falloff. Many paintings will use a combination of the 2. When we understand the properties of light, it becomes much easier to imagine how different light sources might work in our paintings. For example, a flashlight is a very bright light source, so it can travel quite a distance before being affected by falloff. Also, the light is blocked on all sides except the front-facing glass, so the beam expands outward as it travels. Compare that to a candle, which is a weaker light source than a flashlight, so it'll fall off more quickly, but it travels in all directions and will light all nearby objects. All this is to emphasize that no matter what kind of light source you're using, the rules of light always stay the same. The main things we always have to consider are, how bright is the light source, how close is the light source, and what direction is the light traveling in. But there's one more parameter that we can throw into the mix: hard light versus soft light. Let's return to the sun as our light source. We know that it travels in one direction and creates hard-edged shadows, or hard light. But what about on a cloudy day? There's still plenty of light, but it doesn't seem to be coming from any one particular direction, and the shadows become very soft and subtle. This is soft light, and it's the result of scattering. In the previous lesson, we learned that when light hits an opaque surface, it bounces right off at the same angle. When light hits a transparent surface, like air or glass, it's allowed to pass right through. But when light hits a partially transparent surface, which we call translucent, some of it bounces off and some of it continues passing through. Clouds are a translucent surface, so when light hits them, some of it is reflected normally and some of it passes through the surface, bouncing repeatedly and changing direction as it goes until it eventually re-emerges back into the open air. This means that by the time the sunlight reaches us on the ground, It's no longer coming from the direct angle of the sun, but rather from lots of different directions all at once. In this scenario, we do still have a general lighting direction. The light is coming from above because the sun is still above us, but it's also coming from our right, from our left, in front of us, and behind us. The result of this scattered lighting is that all of our shadows become very soft-edged, hence the term soft lighting. Let's break down what's going on. Remember how the softness of the form shadow on our planar sphere versus our smooth sphere was simply the number of transitional planes between them? This is basically the same principle that causes soft lighting, except in this case, it's not the number of planes, but rather the number of light sources that softens the edges. Let's take a look. If we create one light source coming directly from above, we get the same hard shadows that we've seen before. If we split this one light source into 4 light sources and spread them out, the form of the sphere is now being lit more evenly, and we have 4 cast shadows. If we split these light sources again to 8, the effect repeats. The form shadow of the sphere is even more evenly lit, and the multiple cast shadows begin to look like a soft edge. If we repeat this process enough, we eventually have soft lighting and soft shadows. Compare the hard light of our single light source versus the soft light of our scattered light source, and you can clearly see the difference. With hard light, the form has a very clear light side and shadow side, and it casts a hard-edged shadow. With soft light, the form rolls almost imperceptibly towards shadows, and may not have a true shadow side at all. The cast shadow is also completely soft-edged, and fades seamlessly onto the form it's being casted onto. This soft light, sometimes called ambient light, is what happens when light is scattered. The sun's light is strong enough to pierce through the clouds, but it's scattered along the way so that by the time it reaches us, it doesn't seem to be coming from any one direction, just generally from above. This kind of soft light also creates our final type of shadow, occlusion shadows. These are soft, dark shadows that appear where none of our scattered light sources can reach, and they often occur where 2 forms are touching each other. If we look at our simplified soft lighting with only 4 light sources, we can see 4 cast shadows from our sphere. The shadows furthest away from the sphere are being lit by 3 of our 4 light sources, but as the shadows get closer to the sphere, we see zones that are only lit by 2 of our 4 light sources. Even closer, there are zones only being lit by 1 of the 4 lights. Finally, directly between the sphere and the floor, there is a zone where none of our 4 light sources can reach. If we double our light sources to 8, this same effect occurs, but with more subdivisions. If we repeat this enough, our shadow becomes very soft and subtle, except for the suddenly very dark area where the sphere and the floor touch. This is an occlusion shadow. If you find objects in your paintings are looking floaty or not really grounded, then they're probably lacking occlusion shadows. Now, how do we make this a bit more practical? We can't calculate these shadows, but if we understand how they work, we can approximate them. The general rule to keep in mind is that occlusion shadows appear where it's difficult for light to reach. Or think of an open doorway on a cloudy day. There's no clear cast shadow, but the further into the doorway we go, the harder it is for the light from the outside to reach the interior. Or think of grout lines between bricks. Since the bricks protrude outwards, it's difficult for the light to reach in between them to the recessed grout lines. There's lots of places occlusion shadows can occur, and they're not functionally different from cast shadows, they're just the result of soft light rather than hard light. Now here's where things get a little bit tricky. There will be occlusion shadows in basically every painting that you do, even the ones primarily lit by hard light. Why is this? Because almost every realistic situation has both hard and soft lights involved. Let's take a person outside on a bright sunny day. We know that the hard light of the sun will create hard-edged cast shadows, but there's also going to be soft light and occlusion shadows, because there's a second, softer light source, the sky. This is the same kind of scattering that happened with our cloudy day, it's just a much more transparent surface. This scattering turns the sky into a gigantic, soft, blue light source. If we look at a portrait with just the sun's light, we can see the hard form and cast shadows we'd expect. If we look at the same portrait with just the sky's light, we see very soft shadows and occlusion shadows in the nostrils and lips. When we combine the two, we get a more realistic impression of outdoor lighting. It's also mostly visible in the shadow areas, because the soft sky lighting is not nearly as bright as the direct light from the sun. With the sun as a light source, scattering turns the sky into a secondary light source. And it also creates a third light source, which is one of the biggest keys to rich, vibrant lighting. Let's look at our figure with the sun and sky lights again. Now, watch what happens when we put a floor underneath the figure. The shadow areas change completely, becoming much brighter and softer. The floor itself has become a secondary light source, as the light from the sun hits the floor and bounces back upwards into our figure. So with our daytime scene, where the sun is the only thing actually emitting any light, we actually have three different light sources: the direct light from the sun, the scattered light from the sky, and the reflected light from the ground. This addition of reflected light is the key to making the lighting in your paintings look real and vibrant. So let's take a closer look at what's going on. We know that when light hits a surface, it reflects off at the same angle. But that's not all. Some of the light's energy is absorbed by the surface, while the rest of it is reflected off. If we look at two parallel surfaces and shine in a light, the light will reflect repeatedly between the two, losing energy or brightness with each reflection. This reflection accounts for a lot of the light in our world and in our paintings. Here we have a room with no reflected light. We can see the direct light from the windows, but the rest of the room is black because the light isn't reflecting. We can improve this somewhat by adding the soft light from the sky, but the room still feels dark and unrealistic. If we have the light reflect just one time, immediately the scene feels more believable. The light hitting the floor illuminates the walls and ceilings, but there are still some unnaturally dark areas on the floor. If we allow the light to reflect 5 times, the scene begins to feel realistic. The light shines in through the window and hits the floor, reflects off the floor and hits the ceiling, then reflects off the ceiling and hits the floor again, and this repeats until the light has completely expended its energy. As always, this is complicated geometry, but we don't have to calculate it. If we understand how light works, we can make some very accurate guesses. Let's see how we might solve this lighting in a painting. We start by defining our direct light. What is our light source hitting first? In this example, it's the window light on the floor. We then know that the light will reflect, but at what angle? The direct light is traveling downwards and slightly from our direction, so it will reflect upwards and slightly away from us. We can see it reflecting upwards as the light from the floor reflects onto the ceiling, and we can see it reflecting away from us as the light from the floor reflects onto the distant wall. The first reflection is the most important and the most visible. Remember, light loses energy and brightness with each reflection, so although the second and third reflections do make a difference, they're going to be dramatically less impactful than the first one. If we look at our interior one last time and imagine painting this from scratch, we can approximate that the direct light will most strongly reflect onto the wall and ceiling. After that, we can guess that some of the light from the ceiling will reflect back onto the floor. After those 2 primary reflections, we can assume there will be another dozen or so, reflecting at many different angles, which fills the space with soft light and creates occlusion shadows. Interiors are a very dramatic example of this effect, but it happens in all lighting situations. If we thoughtfully consider reflected light, our paintings will immediately become much more vibrant. With that, let's wrap up our overview of light and form. There's a lot more nuance than this, but these basics will keep us busy for a while. If you really want to dive deep into this subject, I highly recommend Dorian Iten's shading course on Proko. But all that's more than enough theory for now. Let's take a break and practice what we've learned. Your assignment for this lesson is to paint more light. For an easy challenge, do some painting studies of the provided references while focusing on the topics from this lesson. For an intermediate challenge, paint some of your own subjects from life. You can use photo reference too, but your eyes are better than a camera, and you'll get more out of it painting from life. For an advanced challenge, take one of the provided references and add a new light source from imagination. Or if you're feeling brave, change the lighting completely. If you find yourself struggling, be sure to check out the full course at proko.com/digitalpainting. We've been building up these skills step by step and lesson by lesson. There's a lot of great information in the free videos, but for the most complete and comprehensive experience, you'll want to grab the full course. So good luck with your assignment. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.